The godswood was silent, except for the soft rustle of wind weaving through the red leaves of the weirwood tree. Ned Stark stood beneath its blood-stained bark, kneeling. His face was tired, lined with more than just age. There was a war coming. He could feel it in his bones. Not the kind with banners and swords, but one that twisted shadows and crept in silence. He had seen it, heard whispers, and now he had made his choice. Behind him, Arya stepped forward, hesitant at first, her feet barely making a sound on the cold stone. She was only a child, or so they thought, but Ned had watched her disappear into the background like mist, move with uncanny silence, learn to read faces as if they were open books. She didn't flinch at the sight of blood. She asked questions about death like a maester probing ancient mysteries. She was not meant to be a lady, and he would not force her to become one. He turned, and for a moment father and daughter stared at each other, a man of duty, a girl of instinct. "Kneel," he said. His voice was low, cracked with uncertainty, but firm with the weight of choice. Arya didn't speak. She dropped to one knee, eyes locked with his. She thought this might be some kind of lesson, maybe another strange game or a punishment in disguise. But then she saw the dagger in his hands. It was not ceremonial. It was Valyrian steel, dark, rippling like water under moonlight. The blade once belonged to House Stark, lost long ago, returned by unknown hands with a note that read, "The wolf must hunt." With the edge pressed to her shoulder, Ned spoke the words, not found in any book or custom. "In the name of the old gods and by the blood of the first men, I name you Arya of House Stark, Queen of Assassins. The blade is yours. The shadows answer to you." Something in the air shifted. Arya didn't know what to say. She blinked. "Is this a joke?" Ned shook his head. "No. The world that's coming will not be won by swords and honor. It will be won by those who move unseen. There is a war behind the war. And you, Arya, you are my sword in the dark." He handed her the dagger. Her fingers wrapped around the hilt, and it felt as if it had always belonged to her. She could feel it in her blood, a strange heat. It was power. It was purpose. It was everything the world had tried to deny her, and just like that a path was set in motion. That same night, Arya disappeared from Winterfell. Ned told no one. Not Catelyn. Not Robb. Not even Maester Luwin. He claimed Arya had gone to foster with a distant cousin in the Vale for education, diplomacy, refinement. But only two souls knew the truth. Arya and the man she met near the edge of the Wolfswood. A man with a face too forgettable to describe, whose voice was soft as silk, and whose presence vanished like smoke when you blinked. He introduced himself with a smile. A girl has much to learn. It wasn't the faceless men who trained Arya in this world. It was something older, something darker. The Brotherhood of Hollow Eyes, an ancient league sworn to the shadows of Westeros, predating even Valyria. Ned had once crossed paths with them during Robert's rebellion. They offered no banners, no loyalty to kings, only balance. They were watchers of chaos, keepers of silence, and now Arya Stark would become their queen. The training was brutal, not just physical but psychological. They broke her, reshaped her, taught her to live without name, without attachment. She learned to speak like others, move like animals, hear things most couldn't. She could change accents at will, mimic footfalls, breathe without sound. She could lie so convincingly, even the gods might believe her. But she never forgot who she was, she never forgot her father. Every mission they gave her, every identity she wore. A merchant girl in Bravos, a boy thief in Gulltown, a mute servant in Dorne. Arya always returned to the same question: who is worth killing? And back in Winterfell, Ned waited. He played his part, quietly gathering information through ravens and whispers. He had given his daughter away not to a life of glory, but one of blood. And it weighed on him. He saw Sansa walking the halls with courtly grace, and thought of Arya walking barefoot across rooftops in the dark. He saw Bran falling from the tower, and wondered if shadows had already begun to gather. Then came King Robert's arrival, and everything changed. King's Landing was a pit of snakes, but Ned entered it with a knife already hidden in the shadows. Arya. She had returned, not as a girl but as a whisper in the wind. She didn't meet her family. She didn't announce herself. She took rooms in the slums, dressed as a washerwoman. From there she watched. She followed Littlefinger's footsteps. listened to Varys's secrets. She tracked Cersei's guards, mapped the Red Keep's hidden paths, and when Jon Arryn's death was questioned, she already knew the answer. She slipped into Pycelle's chambers as quiet as breath. When the old Maester left, she rifled through his scrolls, stole a note written in code. The names of poisons not used since Maegor's reign. She left no trace. But she remembered every detail, every whisper. She didn't kill Pycelle, not yet. That was not the order, because her father had sent her with one purpose: find the cancer before it spreads. Arya sent her first message using a dead crow, literally. Inside its hollow chest was a rolled parchment. The lioness plans to devour the cub. Ned read the note and clenched his jaw. He knew it meant Cersei. He began to unravel the truth, about Joffrey, about Jaime, about Jon Arryn's murder. But it was Arya who gave him the tools. Quietly, precisely, without being seen. But the game moved faster than even shadows could. Cersei smelled rebellion. Varys whispered of spies. Littlefinger watched everything. Arya was nearly caught once, when a Lannister guard followed her to Flea Bottom. She led him into an alley, let him draw close, then slid a needle-thin blade through his ear. He dropped without a sound. She dragged his body into a sewer and vanished into the night. Another face lost in the crowd, but the kill changed her. It wasn't the blood that shook her. It was the ease. She began to dream of wolves, of her father kneeling, of her blade glowing in firelight. Something was waking inside her, something ancient, something cold. Then came the moment. Ned confronted Cersei foolishly, with honor as his only shield. Arya watched it happen from a rooftop, her eyes scanning every guard, every movement. When Robert died and Ned was arrested, Arya didn't run. She didn't scream. She activated every sleeper she had embedded in the city. Beggars, orphans, servants, all trained in whispers and knives. The Queen of Assassins had awakened, and the Red Keep would never be the same again. Keep would never be the same again. The black cells were colder than the crypts of Winterfell, but Ned Stark did not feel the chill. His thoughts were elsewhere, not on honor, not on betrayal, but on her Arya. Had he been wrong to send her down this path? Had he created a monster in his own image, only to unleash her in a world of serpents? Or had he saved her from a fate far crueler, the fate of being powerless? He didn't know yet, but the shadows knew. Above him, far from the dungeons, in the high corridors of Maegor's holdfast, a different kind of war was unfolding. Arya had eyes in every wing of the castle, servants who owed her, children who feared her more than hunger, and those who simply admired her, the faceless girl who gave the weak a purpose. Littlefinger noticed changes. Notes vanishing, plans unraveling, spies turning silent. He thought it was Varys. Varys thought it was someone even he couldn't trace. But neither could name her. That was her power. Even as she moved, no one remembered her face, until the first death Sir Meryn Trant found in his chambers. Not just dead, undissected. His lips sewn shut, his eyes wide open and burned out. No marks of struggle, no signs of forced entry, just a trail of salt leading from his window to his bed. The court called it sorcery. Varys called it precision. Arya called it justice. He was the first on her list. A list that burned in her heart like wildfire. Cersei panicked. She doubled her guards. She suspected everyone, including Jaime. Joffrey threw tantrums. Sansa cried, unsure why the Queen's eyes looked at her like a threat. The air in the Red Keep turned heavy, like it was waiting for thunder. And thunder came. Varys, quiet as ever, dropped a scroll into Ned's cell through a stone slit. It read only 6 words, "The girl weaves." Soon strike, Ned read it 3 times. The girl, not a girl. The girl, he smiled, and just barely. She was alive. But survival wasn't enough now. The next death was a warning. Pycelle's tongue was nailed to the door of the Grand Maester's quarters. His body was untouched, perfectly preserved, seated at his desk like he'd fallen asleep. But a dagger was embedded in the parchment before him. The same Valyrian dagger once gifted to Arya by Ned in the Godswood. Every Lannister in the Red Keep tightened their belts that night. Arya didn't stop. She didn't sleep. She didn't hesitate. She had infiltrated the dungeons by then, dressed as a torchbearer. She counted guards, timed rotations, studied cell keys, but she didn't rescue Ned, not yet. She needed chaos. She needed all eyes away from the cells, so she lit the gardens on fire. 1,000 roses burned beneath the moon, a living flame swallowing the Queen's favorite pleasure garden. No lives lost, no attackers seen. Just a fire. A message. I walk the night. I see you. Cersei lost control. She accused Tyrion of conspiracy. Jaime of negligence. She ordered Sansa confined. Joffrey raged and slapped her. The court shattered into fragments of suspicion. And still, Arya remained unseen. She sent a single line to Ned, carved into bread crust. Hold the storm. And then came her boldest move yet. Arya Stark entered the small council chamber, alone, wearing the face of a blind beggar girl. She stood silently as Pycelle's replacement read off useless proposals, tariffs, feasts, armor contracts. She shuffled near Littlefinger, breathing through her mouth. He didn't notice her hand slide into his coat and take 3 of his signature seal coins. She was gone before anyone noticed the stool she sat on was empty. That night, a sealed order went out with Littlefinger's sigil, forged perfectly. It redirected 20 gold cloaks to the Dragon Pit ruins. At the same time, Arya entered the Tower of the Hand. She knew how to move, where to step. She knew which guard was paid to look the other way. She had bribed him weeks ago, with poison in his wife's tea. The cost of silence, and there in the cells she found him. Ned stared at her for a long time. He recognized her only by her stance, defiant, chin slightly tilted, one hand near her belt even when relaxed. It was the wolf in her. "Father," she said. He choked on her name, but she didn't linger. "There's no time. You leave at dawn. I'll create your shadow." She handed him a satchel, food, a map, a blade, and a ring bearing the sigil of House Blackmont. "It'll get you through Dorne if you need it." He didn't ask how she acquired it. He didn't ask how she got here. He only said, "I am proud of you." Her eyes glistened for a moment, then she left, and hours later, the Red Keep descended into hell. The Sept of Baelor was prepared for Ned's forced confession. Joffrey had sharpened his words. Sansa begged. Cersei smirked. Varys looked calm but watched every movement of the crowd, but then something went wrong. The Sept bells began to ring offbeat. The great bell cracked mid-peal, a sound like thunder tearing bone, and Arya appeared on the statue of the seven-faced god, above the crowd. Face bare for the first time in months, she shouted one word, "Enough!" and then vanished in a swirl of grey smoke. Suddenly, gold cloaks turned on each other. Half had been replaced in the night, with loyalists bribed by Arya's network. Blades clashed, horses screamed. Commoners ran in every direction, and in the chaos Arya dropped down from the rafters, right in front of Joffrey. He tried to scream, but she didn't give him the chance. She sliced his cheek open with the same Valyrian dagger, leaving a scar that would never fade. Then she was gone again. It wasn't meant to kill, it was a message. You are not safe. I can reach you. Anywhere. Arya vanished into the crowd as a child holding a broken doll, and Ned Stark was never brought to the Sept because he was already gone, out of the city, under moonlight. Moving south with cloaks dark as night, Arya had done the unthinkable, not with swords, but silence. The Queen of Assassins had changed the game, but now Westeros would burn from the inside out, because fear had a new name, Arya Stark. Ravens flew in every direction from King's Landing, their wings slicing through early winter winds like tiny blades. The messages they carried were short and panicked. The Hand has escaped. The assassin girl lives. Trust no one. And far beyond the walls of the city, under the cover of a storm, Ned Stark rode through the Kingswood on a stolen horse. Each breath stung with cold. Each heartbeat reminded him of the risk he'd taken the day he named his daughter, not a princess, not a lady, but a killer. He had crowned Arya in secret, and now the world was bleeding for it. He wasn't alone. 2 riders flanked him, one a sellsword disguised as a trader, the other a mute stable boy who was neither mute nor a boy. Arya's network was deep and loyal in ways money could never buy. They would escort Ned to a port near Duskendale, where a ship waited with no name, no flag, and no destination written. But Ned wasn't thinking about the sea. He was thinking about what Arya had become. Back in King's Landing, chaos had taken root, like rot in fruit. Joffrey, humiliated in front of thousands by a single cut on his face, had grown wild with rage. Cersei had 3 more servants executed on suspicion alone. Varys played calm but moved more quickly now, whispering across the narrow sea. And Littlefinger smiled as though this was the best game he'd ever played, one that even he could not fully control anymore, because Arya was gone again, gone from the capital. Gone from her spies, gone like smoke on a battlefield. But she wasn't running. No, she was hunting. The Lannisters had drawn blood. They had set fire to her name, imprisoned her father, ripped her sister into pieces of silence and smiles, and now they were going to pay, not with battles, not with dragons, but piece by piece, one name at a time. Her list, once whispered to herself under a breath on cold nights, now became law. Not vengeance, justice, a new order. Her first target was in Old Town, Maester Rivel, a man few remembered. But Arya remembered. He had advised the Queen's alchemist to experiment on wildfire under Robert's reign. That fire killed 5 children in Flea Bottom, blamed on careless merchants. Arya found him reading in the Citadel's shadow, sipping tea. Laughing with acolytes, she approached as a librarian with ink-stained hands. He offered her a smile, asked if she'd seen his notes. She gave him a flask of wine. It took 15 minutes for the blood to boil in his stomach. Long enough for her to leave the city, and long enough for the story to spread. Another strange death, another sigil left behind, a coin with no face. The name Queen of Assassins began to spread, first whispered in brothels, then in inns, then in the dreams of guilty men. In the Riverlands, Beric Dondarrion heard tales of a faceless girl who killed only those who could not be punished by law. The Brotherhood without banners offered to find her. Arya found them first. She appeared in their camp with no warning, no weapons drawn. Gendry almost didn't recognize her. She didn't smile. She didn't embrace him. She asked one thing. "Do you still believe in justice?" Beric nodded. Thoros raised his goblet in salute. She left by morning, and 3 corrupt Frey riders who had been extorting villages were found hanging from trees with bread stuffed in their mouths. A note pinned to the largest read, "The North remembers." The assassin delivers Arya didn't need armies. She needed memory. In the North, Robb Stark was at war, but even he began to hear the stories. Whispers that Arya lived, that she was not a prisoner, that she had become something else. Catelyn refused to believe them. She thought her daughter lost. Sansa, still a hostage in the Red Keep, overheard guards talking about the Assassin Queen, and something in her chest stirred. Fear, yes. But also a strange sense of pride. Arya had not bowed. She had not been broken. And while all of Westeros burned in open war, she was waging a different kind of war, one written in shadows and silence. In a single night, 4 noblemen loyal to Cersei were killed in their keeps. No doors broken, no signs of struggle. Each one had blood on their hands. Peasants hanged without trial, bastards drowned for scandal, servants whipped for laughter. And each of them died smiling, with poppy extract poured down their throats before a single cut was made. Arya had learned patience, but not mercy. She returned to Westeros from the west coast, sailing through backwaters on salt-rusted fishing boats, never staying in one place more than a night. Her legend grew faster than her body could rest. People began to pray to her, not as a god, but as an answer. When the mountain slaughtered a village in the Reach, a girl with grey eyes and silent feet left a single arrow in the heart of his quartermaster, poisoned. And the guards who laughed as they torched homes, they died in their sleep, with black veins and tongues bitten through. The name Arya Stark had become myth, and myths move faster than kings. Back in Winterfell, Bran Stark woke screaming in the night, his dreams filled with wolves made of shadow. He saw his sister in those dreams, but her face kept changing. Once a raven, once a fox, once a dagger made of ice, and in every vision she stood in front of a burning throne made of bones, not swords. Maester Luwin wrote to Ned, though he knew not where to send it. "Your daughter walks beyond my understanding. The gods are not quiet, and neither was death." Because Arya had set her sights on Harrenhal, the old, cursed castle had become a base for Lannister forces, torturers, enforcers, men who knew only cruelty. She entered as a servant named Mera, unrecognizable, eyes down, hands calloused, voice cracked, and every night someone disappeared, not nobles, not soldiers, but the ones who hurt for sport, the ones who peeled skin and laughed. They vanished one by one, until even Sir Gregor Clegane left Harrenhal in haste. Muttering about ghosts with wolf eyes, Arya stayed until no screams echoed in the halls. Then she walked into the flames of the kitchen hearth, and never came back out, or so they believed, and so the myth deepened. And in King's Landing, Cersei's nights became sleepless. Joffrey flinched at shadows. Even Tyrion, newly returned, felt the air tighten. He had read reports, interrogated spies, burned forged letters. But one scroll chilled his wine hand. "The dagger comes not for your heart, but for your lies. Choose wisely." He poured the rest of his wine on the floor and whispered, "Gods help us, she's not a girl anymore. Snow began to fall in the riverlands, delicate flakes drifting like ash over bloodied fields. War had eaten the realm alive, but it was no longer the banners that men feared. Not wolves, not lions, not dragons. It was silence they feared. Unseen footsteps, a sudden chill before sleep, a girl's whisper in an empty hallway. The Queen of Assassins was no longer just a rumor. She was a reckoning, and deep in the twisted ruins of Harrenhal, blackened by fire and haunted by screams that had never quite left the stone, Arya Stark stood in the belly of the beast. She moved like smoke between corridors, no longer walked. The castle, once bursting with Lannister forces, now sat eerily still, emptied not by battle but by dread. The mountain was gone. His dogs scattered, and those who remained refused to light fires. As if warmth would draw her near, she didn't need to kill any more to rule by fear. Her presence alone was poison. Her legend did the work, but Arya wasn't. On her list still lived, and next upon it was the name that made her blood hum. Like a blade against steel, Tywin Lannister, the Lion of Casterly Rock, the mind behind every cruelty done to her family, the architect of Ned's death sentence, the Red Wedding's silent sponsor, the man whose silence killed as many as his gold. Arya had watched his movements for months now. She knew his habits, his meals, his couriers. She knew he slept lightly, never truly rested. She knew he feared being irrelevant more than he feared dying. She would make sure he got both. She travelled to Riverrun disguised as a merchant's daughter, offering honeyed dates to the Tully remnants. But it was a lie. Every person she passed, a baker, a groom, a page, had been placed like chess pieces. Old contacts, new believers, all waiting. Tywin had called a war council with Freys, Boltons, and surviving bannermen from the Reach, a move meant to stabilize the power shift after Robb's death. But Arya had known it would happen weeks before the message reached their ravens. She was already in the castle when the gates opened for Tywin's host. She wore the face of a serving girl this time. Her voice meek, her smile soft. No one suspected the tray she carried wasn't for refreshment, it was for judgment. That night the council began. The lords gathered around the war table, voices raised, wine flowing. Tywin sat at the head, his expression unmoving. He was in control. Or so he thought, until the screaming started. One by one the torches in the hallway were snuffed out. Then a servant stumbled in, eyes bleeding, frothing at the mouth. He collapsed at Tywin's feet. Another man fell in the courtyard. Then another. No sign of wounds. No signs of forced entry. Just death, quiet, precise. The wine had been untouched, the food tasted, but the water, drawn from the well, had been tainted days ago. A drop of nightshade masked by mint. Arya didn't want to kill Tywin quickly. She wanted him alone. As panic erupted, she walked calmly through the corridors. The guards never stopped her. They saw a frightened girl, wide-eyed and trembling. They let her pass. She found Tywin in his private chamber, sealing scrolls with urgency, armor half-fastened. Sword on the table. "Fetch my guards," he barked. Not even looking at her, she didn't move. He turned. His eyes narrowed and she dropped the face. Her own eyes stared back at him now, cold, calm, unblinking. His lips parted. I'm what you made," she said simply. He reached for his sword. She moved faster, a knife at his throat. "Not deep, not yet." "I'm not here to kill you, Lord Tywin," she whispered, her voice close to his ear. "I'm here to leave you alive." His brow twitched. "You will watch everything you built fall," she continued. "Your name will rot, your banners will burn, and your bloodline will be undone by a girl you couldn't even bother to name." She cut his cheek. "The same way she had marked Joffrey. Now you wear the same shame." Then she was gone. The next morning the Blackfish found Tywin alone, shaking, his guards all dead in their sleep. Not a drop of blood spilled. Tywin ordered no bounty, no message, just silence, but the North heard anyway. Jon Snow, now Lord Commander at the Wall, received word not through Raven but through man, a rider who arrived alone, covered in frost, whispering only, "Your sister leaves names behind like graves." Jon said nothing, but in his eyes there was something between fear and awe, and in the Vale, Peter Baelish, always watching, finally realized he had underestimated one Stark too many. He had plotted chaos, but chaos had given birth to Arya. She had become what he pretended to be, unstoppable. He sent word to his spies in Braavos, to the Citadel, to Dorne, "Find the Wolf Girl." They never returned. Meanwhile, Arya began to spread not just fear but rebellion. In Lannisport, a former whorehouse-turned-sanctuary began spreading her story as gospel. The Queen in Shadows, they called her. In Dorne, girls trained in silent combat called her name before practice. In the Westerlands, common folk began refusing taxes, whispering they'd been freed in the night by someone they never saw. She didn't stop it. She fed it. The idea of Arya Stark, unkillable, untouchable, unleashed, was stronger than any crown. Back in Winterfell, Rickon returned under strange escort, a silent company of masked riders who said nothing, accepted no pay, and left the boy at the gates without a word. Maester Luwin found a note inside his furs. The last wolf must never learn fear. Keep him free. And south, Sansa finally met her sister again. It wasn't in a castle or a courtyard. It was in a darkened hallway of the Red Keep, on a night when screams echoed across the city from another unknown fire. Sansa felt her before she saw her, a presence behind her. A pull in the air, she turned, and Arya stepped out from the shadows, older, thinner, not quite a girl, not yet a ghost. "Arya," Sansa whispered. Arya said nothing. She took her hand and pressed something into it, a folded cloth. Inside, Joffrey's wedding crown, stained in blood. Arya's voice, cold and steady. "You're the last lady of Winterfell. You wear this next." "Not him," Sansa blinked. "But he's still alive." Arya gave her a look. It said, "Everything." Then she was gone again, leaving Sansa holding a crown no longer needed, because Arya didn't want thrones. She wanted truth, and she wanted those who ran the world from shadows to choke on their own darkness. To choke on their own darkness. The first snows came early that year, blanketing the King's Road in white silence. Merchants delayed travel. Ravens flew slower, and across the Seven Kingdoms, war cooled for the first time in years. Not from peace, but from paralysis. No lord moved without checking his guards. No meeting occurred without whispers in the walls. No bannerman slept soundly anymore, because now everyone feared what might be listening, what might already be there, and who might not wake up. The Queen of Assassins had become a plague in the minds of kings. In King's Landing, the Iron Throne sat colder than ever before. The court had grown quieter. The laughter that once filled the small council chamber now existed only in memory. Tywin no longer smirked. Cersei drank earlier in the day. And Joffrey, scarred, twitchy, and haunted, had grown even crueler. Each morning a new execution, a new decree, a new show of power that reeked of desperation. The boy king was losing control, and everyone could see it. Arya had not returned to the capital. She didn't need to. Her name lived in every corridor. She had become a shadow over the city, a presence that never left. She had marked the powerful, and now they waited for death the way peasants once waited for winter. But Arya had moved beyond vengeance. Now she wanted change, real, permanent, bloody change. She began gathering those who had nothing left to lose. Not lords or ladies, not generals or knights, but orphans, beggars, former slaves, women who had been traded like meat, broken men who'd survived too many wars. She called them hollow wolves. She trained them in silence, in shadow. They wore no sigils, took no oaths, swore loyalty not to a throne but to the end of power itself, and they grew. Across Westeros, strange incidents began stacking up. Entire caravans of tax gold vanished. Ships carrying slave chains were found sunk, their crews missing. Captains with throats slit from inside locked cabins. Lords who sold their daughters to older men were found hung upside down, their tongues nailed to trees. No one claimed these acts, but each scene was marked the same way. A crude drawing, burned into wood or carved into stone, a direwolf's face, mouth open, but hollow. The North took notice. Robb Stark, now hardened by war, received strange visitors at his camp. Silent ones. They brought no banners, said no names, but they delivered maps, battle plans, and supply chain breakdowns that no spy could have gathered. Robb demanded to know who sent them. They offered only a name, the Queen in Shadows. His breath caught Arya. She was not the girl he remembered. She was now something else, larger, dangerous, but necessary. He let the messengers live. He let them return, and he began to win battles faster, not with numbers, but with knowledge. Back at the wall, Jon Snow received word from beyond the wall. Not by Raven, but by a wildling boy left at the gate, wearing a black sash that had been braided with a single white hair. Inside his pouch was a scroll. It read, "The real threat walks with cold skin and blue fire. You must lead them, but the fire must never touch the shadow." Jon didn't know what it meant, but he read it again and again. Arya had seen what few others saw. North of the wall she had traveled, disguised as a trader, then as a dead girl reborn. She'd followed whispers, walked through icy ruins, and watched with her own eyes what the others would not believe. White Walkers. She did not fight them. She watched, she learned, and she understood. Killing lords and kings meant nothing if death itself was coming, and this enemy couldn't be stabbed in the dark. It had no name. It had no fear, but it could be delayed. She found the last surviving child of the forest hiding in a forgotten cave near the Frostfangs. The creature gave her no welcome, only a choice. You bring death where you walk, or life if you kneel. Arya did not kneel, but she listened, and when she left she carried something inside her. Not a weapon. Not a spell. A truth. The Night King had once been a man, and man's greatest weakness was memory. Arya turned south again, not with fire in her heart, but a timeline in her mind. The realm had years, maybe less. She could not kill the dead, but she could prepare the living. By cutting out the rot first, she moved fast, from the Stormlands to the Reach, gathering, training, unraveling networks, whispering to those in corners of the world no one thought mattered. In brothels, in ruined towers, in abandoned septs. She didn't build an army, she built an uprising, a movement, and at its center, fear wrapped in justice. Sansa, now hardened by her time in the Red Keep, received a visitor at night. Not Arya, but one of her shadows. She was handed a letter. It read, "The crown you wear must not be gilded in blood. It must be cleaned in it first. Cersei will burn. Be ready." That same night, wildfire reserves under the Great Sept exploded. No one claimed responsibility, but everyone knew. Cersei screamed for vengeance. Joffrey doubled executions. Varys disappeared. Tyrion stopped drinking, and Jaime began to wonder. He had once looked Arya in the eyes, in Winterfell, a child wild and stubborn, eavesdropping behind doors. And now, she'd become the enemy that couldn't be killed. He began to respect her, maybe even fear her more than dragons. Arya was no longer just fighting for vengeance. She was shaping a new world, and she was close. She had infiltrated the Red Keep again, under a different name, a different face. This time as a scepter. She walked the halls. She watched Sansa. She listened to Cersei. She memorized the new guard routines. And when the time came, she would strike not with a dagger, not with poison, but with something even deadlier. Truth. Truth about Joffrey's birth. Truth about Cersei's crimes. Truth that would burn the Iron Throne from the inside out, because Arya Stark had finally realized what her father never did. Justice doesn't live in courts, it lives in shadows. Courts, it lives in shadows. The winds howled louder than they had in years. From the narrow sea to the wall, the cold came not just as weather, but as a warning. Something was changing. The old ways of lords and crowns, lies and loyalty were collapsing. You could see it in the empty halls of crumbling castles, hear it in the prayers whispered in fear, feel it in the quiet just before sunrise. Westeros was holding its breath, waiting for something. And in the heart of it all, Arya Stark walked alone. She no longer needed disguises. Her legend had grown so large, most people no longer believed she was real. And those who did stayed far out of her way. She walked in plain sight now, in black, hooded, her blades visible. Her name carried across the continent, but her face had become myth. Some said she was the ghost of the North. Others whispered she was death itself. But Arya no longer cared what they said, because now it was time. The final names on her list had been saved for last. Cersei Lannister, Joffrey Baratheon, and Littlefinger. Each had shaped the nightmare her family had lived through. Each had earned their ending, and Arya had prepared every detail. King's Landing was rotting from within. The wildfire explosions had crippled the faith. Sansa had begun whispering rebellion into noble ears behind closed doors. The common folk had started carving hollow wolves into alley walls, symbols of silent hope. And inside the Red Keep, Cersei drank her way through each hour. Her paranoia had become prophecy. She saw Arya in every mirror, heard her name in every cough. She knew death was coming, and for once in her life she couldn't control it. Arya entered the city as herself. No masks, no tricks. She walked through the gates during the Festival of the Maiden, when faces were hidden and masks were normal. No one looked at her twice. The guards didn't recognize her, but Varys did. He watched from a shadowed corridor, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. He did not alert the Queen. He didn't send a raven. He simply whispered to himself, "It's already too late." Arya's network had already moved. The gold cloaks stationed around the keep, half of them had been replaced with hollow wolves over the last month. Subtle shifts, dead men whose names were never questioned, sellswards who'd never been paid, even some of the Red Keep's kitchen. Staff now followed her orders. But this wasn't an assassination. This was a performance, a reckoning for all to see. She entered the throne room at dawn alone, no guards, no herald, just the sound of her boots across the marble floor. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, his face half-shadowed by the early sun. Cersei stood beside him, stiff with fear. Jaime was in armor. Tyrion watched from a distance, his eyes tired. "I expected you sooner," Joffrey muttered, his voice breaking with forced confidence. Arya said nothing. Cersei stepped forward, wine cup in hand. "You think you can just walk in here?" Her voice trembled. "This is my kingdom." "You're nothing," Arya finally spoke. "No, I'm everything you were too blind to see coming." She stepped closer. No one stopped her. Jaime raised his hand, not in warning, but in silence. "Let her speak." Arya looked at Tyrion. "You know the truth about him," she said, nodding to Joffrey. "You know what he is." Tyrion said nothing. She turned to the crowd, the lords, the maesters, the servants peeking from behind curtains. "You were ruled by wolves, then lions, but never by the truth." She pulled something from her cloak, a scroll, a confession, written by Pycelle before his death, confirming Joffrey's parentage, signed and sealed, and something else. A letter Cersei once wrote to Lysa Arryn ordering Jon Arryn's death, proof that the war began not with honor or rebellion, but a single woman's fear. Arya threw them both onto the floor. The room froze. Cersei lunged, screaming, wine spilling. Teeth bared, Arya caught her by the throat. "You took my father. You broke my sister. You thought no one was watching." Cersei spat in her face. "I regret nothing." Arya wiped her cheek. "I'll fix that." And then, she didn't kill her. She let her go. Cersei fell to her knees, gasping, humiliated in front of her court, because death would make her a martyr. But Arya knew what humiliation did to queens. It tore kingdoms apart. She turned to Joffrey and knelt. The room gasped. "I don't need to kill you," Arya said. "You'll do that yourself." "Every day, with every lie, with every coward's order." She rose, looked him in the eyes. "But know this, if you ever hurt Sansa again, I'll take your crown off with your skull still in it." She walked out. No one followed, not even Jaime. She disappeared into the streets, swallowed by the wind. But her work wasn't done. She traveled north, to the Vale. Petyr Baelish, the spider behind the chaos, waited for her. He had expected a knife in the back. But Arya stood before him calm. "You think you created me," she said. He smiled. "In a way I did. You're right." And then she gave him something, a scroll, signed by Cersei, offering him Sansa's hand in marriage. In exchange for betraying the North again, Arya walked away and left the doors open. So when the Vale lords found the scroll on his desk, they saw the truth for themselves. Arya didn't need to kill him. His own ambition would do it for her, and with that, the list was done. But Arya's path was far from over. She returned to Winterfell as the first snowstorm swallowed the weirwood. Sansa met her at the gates. No words were spoken, just an embrace, long, fierce, silent. John arrived days later, weary from battles at the wall. He looked at her. "Is it over?" Arya nodded. For now. They sat by the fire that night, and Arya, for the first time in years, slept, not with one eye open, not with a blade in hand, but with the sound of home in her ears, because she had killed more than people. She had killed fear, and in its place, a new world would rise. A new world would rise.